What's up? Harry. I'm gonna be reading from the book Ceremony. Leslie Marmon Silko is the author. I'm gonna start on page 45 cause Harley's burro went faster after they left the spring, and the gray mule had to walk faster to keep slack in the rope. The sun was moving towards the west. Tile squinted, trying to find some clouds on the west horizon. He'd wished then that they had taught him more about the clouds and the sky, about the way priests called the storm clouds to bring the rain. Taya watched the sun for a long time, and at the Acoma road where they stopped, he watched it disappear behind the hills in the west. Harley was looking down on the road with his head turned slightly to the side, listening to something. I think I hear a car. Yeah, okay, Tayo. Harley's voice was excited. If they stop for us, let's leave the burro and the mule here. Then there's a windmill over there. We can come back and get them later on. Harley was already untying the rope behind the burro's neck to use for a hobble. Tao could see the outline of the car coming in the Acoma. It had an umbrella of road dust above it. Harley stood on the side of the road and started waving his arms to flag it down. Tuesday nights are slow, the bartender said. I think this is a flashback starting. Harley finished his second beer and joked with the bartender about how far they had come just for a cold beer. Tao held down onto the beer bottle, feeling moisture condense on his fingers. The bar didn't change. Whatever the color of the walls, they were always dirty, dark, grime of stale beer and cigarette smoke. It always smelled the same too, the lingering odor of urine and vomit. Even the light bulb above the pool table shined dim, soiled light. He was glad no he noticed it now because before he drank the beer. He had seen the color of that light once before, but he had never been too sure if it was the light or the beer he was drinking. He drank the beer slowly and wanted to feel it slowly spread from his belly, warming him all over. He finished the bottle and leaned back in his chair. He wanted to remember Rocky's face again and think of them together. Rocky was standing in a small clearing surrounded by thickets of scrub oak. It was still early in the fall and only a few of the coppery yellow leaves had fallen from the oaks. Tao had to restrain to see the deer in the tall yellow grass. He crossed the narrow dry gully and then he could see the antlers. He approached the deer slowly. It had fallen on its right side with its forelegs tucked under its belly. Its hind legs were curled and were to the left, as if it were still sleeping in the grass. The eyes were still liquid and golden brown, staring at the dark mountain dirt and the dry oak leaves tangled in the grass. When he was a little child, he always wanted a pet deer. He wanted to he wanted to pet a deer, and he daydreamed that a deer would let him close and touch his nose. He felt and touched the nose, those softer than pussy willow and cat tails, still warm as a breath. The bright blood in the nostrils were still wet. He touched the big mule-sized ears, and they were still warm. He knew it would not last long. The eyes would begin to cloud, turn glassy green, the gray sinking back in the skull. The nose would harden, and the ears would get stiff. But for that moment it was so beautiful that he could only stand and feel the presence of the deer. He knew what they said about the deer was true. Rocky was honing his knife. He set the blade on a thread hanging from the sleeve of his jacket. The sun was setting, and in the southwest sky from the Twin Peaks it could be dark in an hour or so. Rocky rolled the carcass belly up and spread open the hind legs. When Tao saw he was getting started, he looked at the eyes again. He took off his jacket and covered the deer's head. "Why did you do that?" asked Rocky, motioning at the jacket with the blade of his knife. Long gray hairs were matted into blood onto the blade. Tao didn't say anything because they both knew why. The people said you should do that before you go to the deer, out of respect. But Rocky was funny about those things. He was an A student in all state in football and track. He had to win. He was always going to win. So he listened to his teachers, he listened to his coach. They were proud of him. They told him, "Nothing can stop you now, except one thing. Don't let people at home hold you back." Rocky understood what he had to do to win in the white outside world. Where after their first year at boarding school in Albuquerque, Tao saw Rocky deliberately avoided the old ways. Old Grandma shook her head at him, but he called out superstition, and he opened his textbooks to show her. But Auntie never scolded him. She never let Robert or Josiah talk about him either. She wanted him to be a success. She could see what white people wanted an Indian, and she believed this way was his only chance. She saw it as her only chance too. This way was his only chance. Oh, yeah. After all, the village gossiped about their family. When Rocky was a success, no one would dare say anything about them anymore. Rocky slit the throat, but spilled over the grass and into the dirt, and splashed on his boots. He didn't believe in drinking the warm blood as some hunters did. Tayo held a hind leg. It was beginning to get stiff. Rocky cut off the musk glands and the testicles. He slit the belly open carefully to avoid spilling the contents of the stomach. The body heat made steam in the cold air. The sun was down and the twilight chill sucked the last of the deer's life away. The eyes were dull and sunken. It was gone. Josiah and Robert came then and unloaded their rifles and leaned them against the scrub oak. They went for the deer, lifted the jacket, they knelt down and took pinches of cornmeal from Josiah's leather pouch. They sprinkled the cornmeal on the nose and fed the deer's spirit. They had to show their love and respect, the appreciation. Otherwise the deer would feel offended, and they would not come to die for them the following year. Rocky turned away from them and poured water from the canteen over his bloody hands. He was embarrassed at what they did. He knew when they took the deer home, it would be laid out on a Navajo blanket, and the old grandma would put a string of turquoise around its neck, and put silver and turquoise rings around the tips of the antlers. Josiah would prepare a little bowl of cornmeal and place it by the deer's head so that anyone who went near could leave some on the nose. Rocky tried to tell them that keeping the carcass on the floor in a warm room was bad for the meat. He wanted to hang the deer in the woodshed where the meat could stay cold and cure properly. But he knew how they were. All the people, even the Catholics who went to the Mass every day, followed the ritual of the deer, so he didn't say anything about it, but he avoided the room where they laid the deer. They marked the place where Tayo's t-shirt spread across the top of some scrub oaks. It was getting dark when they started hiking back to the truck. Tayo wrapped the liver and the heart in the clean cheesecloth Josiah carried with him. An early winter moon was rising in front of him, and a chill wind came with it, penetrating feet and hands. Tayo held a chill wind came within, penetrating feet and hands, held the bundle tighter. He felt humbled by the size of the full moon, by the chill wind that swept wide across the foothills of the mountain. They said that the deer gave itself to them because it loved them, and he could feel the love of it as the fading heat of the deer's body warmed to his hands. Harley slid another bottle of Coors across the table to him and said, "Hey man, we didn't come here to stare at the walls. We can do that anytime. We need some music." He walked over to the jukebox. "Something to get us happy right now." Harley was a little nervous, but he remembered the time Tayo went crazy in the bar and almost killed Emo. He remembered how Tayo had sat staring at the wall, not saying anything all afternoon, while the rest of them had been laughing and drinking beer and telling army stories. Harley told the others not to bother him, but they were drunk and they kept after him. Finally, Tayo jumped up and broke a beer against the table, and before they could stop him, he shoved the jagged glass into Emo's belly. Tayo smiled and looked over at Harley. "I won't push any broken bottle into your belly, Harley. Your belly's too big anyways." Harley laughed. You sure scared us that time, man. Skinny as you are, you took 3 guys to pull you off of him. You know what they say, Harley. Crazy people are extra strong." Harley shook his head. He was serious. "No, Tayo, you weren't crazy. You were just drunk." They all had different explanations for the attack. Emo claimed they never got along, not since grade school, and when they had rock fights in the schoolyard, he said Tayo just wanted to get even with him for a long time. They all had explanations. The police, the doctors at the psychiatric ward, even Auntie and old Grandma. They blamed liquor and they blamed war. Reports note that since the Second World War, a pattern of drinking and violence not previously seen before is emerging among Indian veterans. Tayo shook his head when the doctor finished reading the report. "No?" The doctor said in a loud voice. "There's more than that. I can feel it. It's been going on for a long time. What do you think it is?" "I don't know what it is, but I can feel it all around me." "Is that why you tried to kill Emo?" "Emo was asking for it." The wind stirred the dust. The people were starving. "She's angry with us," the people said. "Maybe because of that Kyo-yo. I'm gonna be terrible at pronouncing these names. We were fooling with, we better send someone to ask our forgiveness. They noticed the hummingbird was fat and shiny. He had plenty to eat. They asked how come he looked so good. He sat down below, 3 words below his ear. 3 words, 3 worlds belong below this one. Huh, English is hard. 3 worlds below this one. Everything is green, all the plants are growing, and the flowers are blooming. I go down there and eat. You were real lucky, man. Real lucky. You could have gone to jail. But they just sent you to the hospital again. If it had been me, I'd probably still be sitting in jail. I'd probably still be sitting in jail. Holly's Harley's words were becoming disjointed, and he was accenting the words at the beginning and swallowing it at the ending, sounding like until it didn't sound like English anymore. He had another beer, and then he was rambling on to himself in Laguna. Emo rattled the Bull Durham sack. He bounced on the palm of one hand and then the other. He took another swallow of whiskey. He had to have 2 or 3 swallows of whiskey before he'd talk. He took out the little cloth sack when he was ready. You know, he said. You know, he said, slurring the words. Us Indians deserve something better than the goddamn dried up country around here, blowing away every day. He laughed at the rhyme he made. The other guys laughed too because Emo was mean when he was drinking. What we need is what they got. I'll take San Diego. He laughed, and they all laughed loudly. He threw the bag up in the air and caught it, confident in his audience. He didn't see Tayo sitting in the back corner, leaning back in the chair with his eyes closed. He didn't know what Tayo was clenching in his muscles against their voices. He didn't know that Tayo was sweating, trying to fight off the nausea that surged at him whenever he heard the rattle in the little bag. We fought their war for them. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did. But they got everything, and we don't got shit, do we? Huh? They all shouted, Hell no! Loudly, and they drank the beer faster, and Emo raised the bottle, but not bothering to pour the whiskey into the little glass anymore. They took our land. They took everything. So let's get our hands on white women. They cheered. Harley and Leroy were grinning and slapping each other on the back. Harley looked over at Tayo, who was reading the label on the beer bottle. Coors beer brewed from pure Rocky Mountain spring water. Adolph Coors Company, Golden, Colorado. He looked at the pictures on the cascading spring on the bottle. He didn't know of any springs that big anywhere. Did they have droughts in Colorado? Did they ever have droughts in Colorado? Maybe Emo was wrong. Maybe white people didn't have everything. Only Indians had droughts. He finished off the beer. Harley was watching him and gave him another one. He couldn't hear anything in the little bag anymore, but he could still see Emo playing with it. He was thirsty. Deep down, somewhere behind his belly, near his heart, he drank the beer as if it was tumbling ice-cold stream in the mountain canyon on the beer label. He kept drinking it, and Harley kept shoving the bottle across the table at him. Attention shifted from Emo to Tayo. Hey, look at him. No wonder he doesn't say anything. How many does that make? Harley counted the empty bottles. He said something, but it was difficult for Tayo to hear clearly. Their voices sounded dim and far away. He got up and weaved his way between the chairs and the tables to the toilet at the back of the room. The yellow-stained walls were at the far end of the long tunnel between him and the world. He reached out. Ooh. The yellow-stained walls were at the end of the long tunnel between him and the world. He reached out across this distance to try to steady himself against the walls. He looked down at the stream of urine. It wasn't yellow but clear like water. He imagined then that if a man could bring the drought, he could also return the water, out of his own belly, out of his own body. He strained the muscles of his body and forced it out. He pushed down on the handle of the toilet, but didn't flush. The lid of the toilet tank was leaning against the wall, and the floor was covered with dirty water. It was soaking through his boots. The sensation was sudden and terrifying. He could not get out of the room, and he was afraid he would fall into the stinking, dirty water and have to crawl through it. Like before, like jungle clouds raining down filthy water that smelled ripe with jungle clouds smelled ripe with death. He lunged at the door. He landed on his hands and knees in the dark outside the toilet. The dreams did not wait any more for that night. They came out any time. When he got back to the table, he saw Emo's glasses were sitting crookedly on his puffy face. Emo watched him walk across the room to the table. There he is. You think he's something, all right, because he's part white, don't you, half-breed? Tyler stopped in front of him. He saw all their faces clustered around Emo's fat, sweaty head. He thought of dogs standing over something dead, crowded close together. He couldn't make out Harley or Leroy or Pinky. All he could see was Emo's sullen face. He stood there in front of them for a long time until his eyes lost focus. Someone touched his arm. Come on, Tyler, sit down with us. He put his mouth close to Tyler's ears. Emo didn't mean nothing. He was just drunk, that's all. Tyler sat down. He knew Emo meant what he said. Emo had hated him since the time that they had been in grade school together, and the only reason for this hate was that Tyler was part white. Tyler was used to it by now, since he could remember. He had known Auntie's shame for what his mother had done, and Auntie's shame for him. He remembered how the white men who were building the new highway across the Laguna had pointed at him. They had elbowed each other and winked. He never forgot that, and finally, years later, he understood what it was about. He understood was about white men and Indian women, the disgrace of Indian women who went with them, and during the war, Tyler learned about white women and Indian men. We went to this bar on 4th Street, see? Me and O'Shea, this crazy Irishman. We had a few drinks, and I saw one. These two white women, sitting all alone. One was kind of fat with dark hair. This other one, man, she had big tits and real blonde hair. I said to him, hey buddy, that's the one I want. Over there. He said, go get him, chief. He was my best drinking buddy, that guy. He watched me see how good I score with each one. I'm Italian tonight. Ooh, wow. He laughed and hollered so hard. Both of these girls were smiling, watching us then. I smiled at both of them, see, so they both think I was friendly. But I gave my special look to the blonde, so she'd know, see. That's how I do it. And I went up to the bar and told the bartender I wanted 2 more of whatever the ladies over there was drinking, and I went over. They took the drinks, and the fat one asked me to sit down. I sat down close to the blonde, and they told my name. I used Matucci's name in that night. This wop in our unit. The fat girl had a car. I sat in the middle, grabbing titties with both hands, all the way down to Long Beach. Next day, my buddy was dying to know. He kept asking all morning, well? Well? I told him, right. Well, I scored all right. Which one? Which one? Not one, I said. Both of them? I'll be goddamned, he said. All in the same bed? Yes, sir. And this Indian was grabbing white pussy all night. Shit, chief. That's some reputation you're making for Matucci. Goddamn, I said. Maybe next time I'll send him a bill. Pinky was holding his belly, laughing so hard. Leroy and Harley were slapping each other on the backs, laughing real hard. Hey, Emo, that's a good one. Hey, tell the one about that guy that told on you. Which guy? When you were bawling that little redhead and that, what's his name, the Irishman. Yeah, he knocked on the door, you know. The Irishman knocked on the door and yelled, Hey, Geronimo! Oh yeah, that's time. Oh, yeah, that time. Emo's forehead was covered with little balls of sweat. He wiped them off with the back of his head. He was looking at Tile. Come on, Emo, tell it. I don't feel like it. The corners of his mouth looked sullen. It's so damn funny. That white guy yells, Hey, Geronimo! And the white woman hears him say, Who's that? He says, A drunk Irishman. She says, No, who's that, Geronimo? You have a titty in your mouth so you don't answer, she says. That Indian, isn't it? She yells back at him. That guy's an Indian? He says. Yeah, his name's Geronimo. She starts screaming and faints. And faints. Passed out. Well, anyway, she fainted or passed out. Leroy and Pinky finished the story and went for more beer. There's something about the story that Emo didn't like. Ty was watching him. He didn't turn his eyes away when Emo looked back at him. They sat staring across at each other across the big round table. Ty remembered fighting tomcats then, the frozen pups, arched bodies coiled, only their tails twitching with their anger. Only one or two others made a move, and they went rolling around in the dirt. You don't like my stories, do you? Not good enough for you. Huh? You think you're some hot shit like your cousin, big football star, big hero? Pointing his finger at the empties in front of the tile. One thing you can do is drink like an Indian, can't you? Maybe you aren't no better than the rest of us, huh?